Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going exploring some essential building blocks for anyone learning English. Those tricky little things called prepositions.
Ah, yes, prepositions. The bane of many an English learner.
Yeah, definitely. But don't worry, today we're going to make them a little less intimidating and even, dare I say, a little fun.
Fun prepositions. Now that's a challenge.
Challenge accepted. Our secret weapon, a super engaging YouTube English lesson that we found. And to add even more practicality to the mix, we'll also be exploring some common vocabulary for talking about your house. So get ready to describe your dream home in English, because that's where we're headed.
Sounds like a plan. I'm always up for expanding my vocabulary, especially when it comes to home decor.
Me too. But first, let's tackle those prepositions. So this YouTube lesson starts with the basics, prepositions of place, like on, under, in front of.
The classic trio. Simple, yet so essential.
Exactly. But here's what I love about this lesson. Instead of just giving dry definitions, they use simple examples like, the book is on the table to help you really visualize those spatial relationships.
It's all about creating those mental images, right? Because prepositions aren't just abstract concepts. They're about how we understand and interact with the physical world around us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And think about it. We use prepositions all the time without even realizing it. Like when we give directions, turn left at the corner, the restaurant is on your right.
It's true. Prepositions are everywhere. They're like the hidden scaffolding of our language.
Love that analogy.
Uh-huh.
But this YouTube lesson takes it even further. They don't just tell you about prepositions. They actually get you moving.
Oh, this is the part I was excited to talk about. It's so clever how they incorporate movement into the learning process.
Right. So the instructor actually has you physically move a pen using different prepositions.
Yeah.
It's so interactive, it's fun, and, it's such a great example of how bringing your body into the mix can actually help you learn.
Absolutely. It taps into what's called kinesthetic learning, where movement reinforces understanding. I'm telling you, you will never forget the difference between in and on after physically placing that pen somewhere.
I totally agree. And from there, the lesson takes us on this virtual tour of a house to learn vocabulary for different rooms and furniture.
That's such a smart approach because you're not just memorizing isolated words, you're learning them within a context that makes sense.
Exactly. And it's like, how sometimes you struggle to remember a new word, but if you learn it within a familiar setting, like in this case a house, it gives your brain those extra hooks to hold on to that information.
It's like creating a mental map of the language, right? Each room becomes a little compartment for storing those new words.
I love that. A mental map of language. That's brilliant. And as we go from room to room, they sprinkle in these little grammar nuggets. Like, do you remember when they emphasized that furniture is a collective noun and it's never pluralized?
Oh, that's a good one. I know so many people, even native English speakers, who get tripped up on that one. It's always furniture, not furnitures.
Right. It seems simple, but it's one of those sneaky little grammar rules that can catch you off guard.
For sure. And it's a great reminder to pay attention to those uncountable nouns. It's easy to get mixed up, but thinking about them visually can really help. Like, you can have many pieces of furniture, but furniture itself is this single concept.
Oh, that's a really helpful way to think about it. And it's not just furniture. It's like information
Yeah.
or advice, right? Those are also singular no matter how much you have.
Precisely. And the more we can visualize those abstract nouns as single entities, the less likely we are to make those pluralization mistakes.
Okay, so let's get back to our virtual house tour. Imagine this. We start in the bedroom, right? And we encounter familiar words like bed, lamp, dresser.
The bedroom basics. I can picture it now. Cozy and inviting.
Exactly. But then they also introduce some less common terms like chest of drawers, which is just another way of saying dresser. But, it's like they're giving you synonyms on the fly, which is a great way to expand your vocabulary.
It's subtle but effective, right? Because they're not just throwing a bunch of random words at you. They're building on what you already know and showing you how to express the same idea in different ways.
Totally. And they don't shy away from regional variations either. For example, they point out that in England, a stove is called a cooker, which I thought was really interesting.
Right. That's so important to be aware of, especially if you're learning English to communicate internationally. Language is so dynamic and it's constantly evolving, so knowing those regional differences can really come in handy.
Absolutely.
Oh,
And it just adds another layer of richness to the learning experience.
okay. So we've explored the bedroom. Where does our virtual tour take us next?
Next stop, the kitchen, of course.
The heart of the home. I'm ready for some culinary vocabulary.
Okay, so get ready for words like refrigerator or fridge for short. We got table, chairs, all the essentials.
And hopefully no bed in the kitchen.
No. They made that very clear, no beds in the kitchen. But speaking of making things clear, they also use a bit of humor to reinforce the vocabulary.
Oh, I love that. Humor is such a powerful tool for learning. It makes things more enjoyable and memorable. What kind of humor did they use?
Well, remember the bathroom?
Ah, yes, the bathroom. Can't forget the bathroom. What about it?
Well, there was this unexpected detail. They mentioned a man in the bathtub.
Oh, that's right. I was not expecting that. But hey, it definitely made that vocabulary word stick.
Right. I mean, who would have thought a man in the bathtub would be our vocabulary learning aid for the day?
Yeah.
But it just shows that this YouTube lesson is not your typical dry language course.
It's all about making it fun and engaging. And I have to say, they're doing a fantastic job.
Agreed. And that fun factor, it's what makes you want to keep learning.
Absolutely. If it feels like a chore, you're much less likely to...
Exactly. Okay, so from the kitchen, we naturally flow into the living room.
Ah, the living room. Time to relax and unwind after all that vocabulary exploration.
Right. And we learned about sofa, carpet, cabinet, and even a green armchair. I love that they add those little details.
Me too. It helps you visualize the space and makes it feel more real. Like you could actually walk into that living room and plop down on that green armchair.
I know, but hold on, there's more. Because this YouTube lesson doesn't just stop at teaching us words, it actually gets us using them in this really clever way. But we'll dive into that after the break.
Sure.
So they don't just teach the words, they get you using them.
That's where the real learning happens, right? It's not enough to just recognize a word. You have to be able to use it actively in a sentence.
Exactly. Remember that picture of a living room they showed?
Oh, yeah, I remember that. It was like they were setting the stage for a language challenge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then they start asking questions like, where's the lamp? Or what's in front of the sofa?
Yes. And suddenly you're not just passively watching a video, you're actively engaged, trying to recall those prepositions and vocabulary words.
And that's where it clicked for me. It's like, okay, you've learned the words, now let's see you put them into action.
It's like that saying, tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I learn. This YouTube lesson is all about involvement.
I love that.
Yeah.
It really highlights how powerful active learning can be. But they don't stop there. They take it even a step further with this other activity.
Oh, you mean the incomplete sentences?
Yes. Like the book is the table, and you have to fill in the blank with the correct preposition.
Such a simple but effective way to test your understanding.
Right. You have to think about the meaning of the sentence, the relationship between the objects, and then choose the right preposition to complete the thought.
It's like solving a little language puzzle.
And it's amazing how much thought goes into choosing the right preposition.
Because each one conveys a slightly different meaning, right? It's not just about grammar, it's about precision of expression.
Exactly. And it made me realize that prepositions are more than just those little words we often take for granted. They're essential for conveying meaning and creating clear communication.
Absolutely. They're like the glue that holds our sentences together. Without them, everything would just fall apart.
So true. But there's another layer to this that I found fascinating.
Oh, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Okay, so do you remember after they do that picture description and then they do the sentence completion activities?
Yeah, it's like they're building upon each concept, gradually increasing the complexity. What happened next?
Well, they shift gears again and introduce this whole new concept called meta-language.
Meta-language. Okay, that sounds a little intimidating. What exactly is that?
Honestly, I was a little confused at first too. But basically, it's like language about language.
Language about language. Okay, I think I'm starting to get it. So it's like taking a step back and analyzing how language works, right?
Exactly. And it's about understanding the structure, the nuances, and even the limitations of language.
Interesting. So how does this seemingly simple YouTube lesson bring meta-language into the mix?
Well, think about those incomplete sentences they presented. They're not just testing grammar. They're actually prompting us to think about the very building blocks of language.
Ah, I see. They're encouraging us to become more conscious of the language itself, not just the words we're learning.
Right. It's about developing that metalinguistic awareness, which can actually help us become better communicators overall.
So even though this YouTube lesson might seem simple on the surface, it's actually packed with these subtle but powerful learning strategies.
I know, right? It's like they've managed to squeeze a whole linguistics course into one fun, engaging video.
And it's a great reminder that learning can happen anywhere, anytime.
Even from a seemingly basic online video, right?
Exactly. All it takes is a curious mind and a willingness to dive a little deeper.
Well said. And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into English prepositions, household vocabulary, and the surprising world of metalanguage.
But before we wrap up, I want to leave you with this thought. How can you apply these principles of active learning, contextualization, and even humor to your own language learning journey?
Ooh, that's a great question to ponder, and a perfect way to end this part of our deep dive. It really is, isn't it? It's amazing how much we've unpacked from this one YouTube lesson. It really does make you think differently about, well, about how you approach learning a language, you know?
For sure. It's not just about passively absorbing information. It's about actively engaging with it, finding ways to make it relevant to your own life, and honestly, having fun with it.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it all comes back to that idea of meta language, doesn't it? Like, it's like they're subtly encouraging us to think about language itself, not just the words we're trying to learn. It's like they're saying, hey, let's pull back the curtain and see how this whole language thing actually works.
Exactly. Have you ever noticed how some people just seem to have a knack for languages? It's like they can intuitively grasp the patterns and structures.
Yeah, totally. I've always envied those people. I feel like I have to work so much harder to learn a new language.
Well, developing that metalinguistic awareness can actually help us all tap into that ability. It's like giving your brain a toolkit for deciphering any language, you know?
So it's not just about memorizing vocabulary lists. It's about understanding how the language works at a deeper level.
Precisely. It's about recognizing those grammatical building blocks, those subtle nuances that give language its richness and complexity. And the more we understand those underlying principles, the easier it becomes to learn and use any language.
It's like once you start seeing those patterns, a whole new world opens up.
Exactly. And it's not just about learning a language, it's about unlocking the code to human communication itself, you know?
Wow, that's pretty amazing when you think about it that way.
It is, isn't it? And it all starts with that curiosity, that willingness to pay attention to the language around us.
And not being afraid to make mistakes.
Absolutely. Experiment. Play with the language. Don't be afraid to get things wrong. That's how we learn.
That's so true. I think this deep dive has really changed my perspective on language learning. It's not just about cramming vocabulary or memorizing grammar rules. It's about becoming a more conscious and confident communicator and having fun while you're doing it.
Exactly. Learning a language should be an adventure, a journey of discovery. So embrace the challenge. Find those moments of joy, those little sparks of insight that make the whole process come alive.
Well said. And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into English prepositions, household vocabulary, and the surprising power of metalanguage.
Remember, keep exploring, keep experimenting, and keep diving deep. You never know what you might